So for the past couple of weeks, I've been replaying the original Rage, which actually prompted this is when I beat a Plague Tale Innocence, I was actually going to start Rage 2, but I wanted to go back and replay the original Rage first because it's been 8 years since I last played it. I only played it once when it was brand new. And I was also interested because after I replayed the original Red Dead Redemption and how that yielded such a significantly different opinion and experience versus the first time I played that, I wanted to see if the same would happen for the original Rage. Now, when this game came out, I remember liking it. I thought it was a good game and I enjoyed my time with it. But I also remember it being very polarizing. I had like half of my friends didn't like it at all whatsoever, and then like there was another half which thought the game was good, and that was basically the camp that I was in. I did enjoy my first time with Rage, but what I found interesting is that I actually beat this game the first time around in just under 10 hours, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, it was a short game. And so I started playing this game right again, and because I play games very differently than when I did 8 years ago, right? So like these days I take my time, I do all the side missions that I could come across, and I do as much content in the game as possible. I try to give myself the full complete experience. And so I actually ended up realizing that the first time around I skipped a lot of content in this game. In fact, so much so that I think I only did the story. I didn't do any side missions. I didn't do any of the races or a lot of the races, and even because I bought this game on release, it was called the Anarchy Edition. It came with like an exclusive mission and stuff. I even didn't do that exclusive missions, and so I was getting achievements for a bunch of the side content in this game during my second time playing it 8 years later. And what I actually found out is I ended up beating this game in just under 15 hours, which means that I basically gave myself an extra 5 hours of gameplay just doing the side content for this game, And there's special upgrades that I got for my weapons that I didn't think I got before, and so it was quite interesting. I guess the first time around when I played this, and I don't know if it was because there were other games around that time, I do remember that this was the last game that I basically did a playthrough for, and while I was doing the playthrough of this game, I said that I was going to stop doing playthroughs, and that was a video I did, and that was back when I was still trying to identify my channel and where it was going to be, and I just wasn't sure, right? Because I've done everything pretty much. I've done playthroughs, I've done reviews, I've done videos like this before, I've done pure multiplayer footage, and I tried just doing vlogs, right? I tried like a bunch of different stuff, and so to say my channel is like one thing is an understatement, right? But I remember when I played, I actually have like, I think 30 parts of my original playthrough of this game still up on YouTube, but it's incomplete because this was about half my way through this game is when I decided that I was going to stop doing playthroughs for various reasons. But that's a completely different topic. But basically, I have footage of when I first played this game up on this channel, and it's quite interesting. But going back and playing it now, what I realized immediately was how the landscape of modern id games completely changed versus how they were back in this day, right? Because this is, now we have experienced Doom 2016, we have experienced the Wolfenstein, the new saga, we've experienced these games, and these games are very, very fast-paced first-person shooters, right? Especially Doom out of all of them. Wolfenstein 2, and that was one of my big issues with Wolfenstein 2, is that it tried so much to be like the fast-paced combat of Doom, instead of being like the New Order, which was more cover-based. But this game, right, is extremely cover-based, and yes, it does have a few instances where it is sort of run and gun and there's enemies coming at you from all sides, right? There's moments in the game like that, but the majority of this game I found is just simple cover to cover based shooting, and it was very jarring to me because it was like, wow, this game is extremely slow paced compared to the likes of Doom, and the other id games like Wolfenstein 2. It is not like those games at all, and I don't remember it being as slow paced, the first time around, but that's because I didn't. It only released, I think, this game and Quake 4, right? So and they were very different games for different eras, and so versus something like Doom, which I think they completely rebooted it from the ground up, and that was sort of Doom's identity, was this fast-paced gameplay, right? But I feel like a lot of other games, modern id games, are sort of taking from that and trying to replicate it, but it sort of doesn't work as well. But playing this game, it's interesting because of how slow paced it is, and also how heavily atmospheric this game is. The artists have gone in, and there's a lot of attention to detail in the environments. And I say it's more atmospheric than even Doom or Wolfenstein, because while those games, yes, have atmosphere, of course, they are, I think it's the structure of how the levels are created, and also the fact that the games just don't stop, right? It's sort of like it's very rare that you get breathing room in those games, and this was the type of game where it's sort of like, okay, you'll walk through some damp caves, and you'll hear from the sound a little water's dropping into puddles and everything like that, and then you can hear some screaming off in the distance. It's very atmospheric, right? Versus something like Doom, like if you're in a refinery, it's just factories working and then that's it. It doesn't build up as much, but also it's very different. I think it's because of this game's more open world design that it's it really relies on its atmosphere to sort of pull you in. I also didn't realize the first time around when playing this game how heavily tied in and close this game tries to be to Mad Max. It really tries to emulate that sort of environment that Mad Max had in that franchise, and it really kind of pays homage to that, especially with the character designs and the whole thing with the car combat. I was, gosh, how old was I when I played this game the first time around? Maybe like 15, 16 years old, right? And I don't think I was introduced at all to like Mad Max at that point yet. But obviously knowing what I know now, and it's kind of interesting because the developers of the Mad Max game made Rage 2, and it's like, oh wow, this is, of course, they're like the perfect choice to like make this game, right? Because they've already are used to that sort of environment, right? That atmosphere that Mad Max gives off. So yeah, playing this game the second time around, my opinion on it didn't change as heavily as the original Red Dead Redemption did when I replayed that. My opinion on it kind of stayed the same. I think it's a very good game. One thing I really appreciate, and this is last gen, keep in mind, is how unrelentingly fierce this game's hold on a consistent 60 frames per second is. I notice zero, and maybe if it's not zero, then negligible, you can't even notice, no amounts of frame rate drops whatsoever. And that's more than I can say for some of the modern id Tech games coming out, for example, like Wolfenstein 2, like those games don't really have a constant hold on 60 frames per second, and maybe that's because of the push to more, a more PC heavy user base, and consoles sort of not having the power that they used to have, but this is last gen hardware, and I know that the id Tech was built around this, right? And I think that even id tried to really heavily optimize this game well for consoles, so much so that they sort of left the PC version in a crappy state on launch. But I was really impressed by that. Is that still all these years later, I think it really contributes to how good the gunplay feels in this game. It is a solid game because of its constant hold of 60 frames per second. It's not sitting there wavering around. Doesn't matter how busy the game gets, it's completely full on 60 frames per second 100% of the way through, which is fantastic. And I think that really helps make the game feel really good to play, and on top of that helps it hold up all these years later, because very, very few and far between did we get 60 frames per second titles on last gen. It's definitely more common this gen. So overall, I would say that Rage was interesting. I think what really helped, what I was really looking forward to replaying this game again was just going to revisit all these environments and sort of refreshing myself on the story and what happened in the first game, so that when I went into Rage 2, it was sort of like, oh, okay, now I know, where we left off, and oh, I remember this guy from the original Rage, because I do know that some characters make a return, although I think that your main character in Rage 2 is completely different to this character that you're playing in the original Rage. But what's going to be interesting is, I guess I'll just find out, is whether your new character from Rage 2 is in fact someone that you helped out by re-emerging the arcs in this game. So yeah, it was interesting to replay this game again. I think that it sort of holds up, all these years later. It still plays very well. It's still competent. It's just surprised me how slower paced this game is compared to like the modern id games of today. Even graphically, I would say the game is still, it's a very art direction driven game, right? So you don't look at this for like the quality of the textures and the lighting and all that. Everything's very static, right? There's not even like destructible environments that much at all, but this game has a very good attention to detail when it comes to its art direction. You notice like the really nice lighting and the different color palette changes and all the different things, like the placement of certain objects and everything like that. They sort of tell a story within the environment themselves, and so that's something that again, it just lends itself to the heavy atmosphere of this game, which really sort of surprised me, and I didn't realize when I was going back to play it the first time around, I didn't realize how heavily atmospheric this game is. But that it was really cool to go back and play this game again. So I'm gonna be starting Rage 2 next week. It'll be pretty cool. I know that again, it's sort of similar to this game. People's opinion on it are sort of mixed, and I don't know whether that's because the people who don't like it as much, don't like the structure of id type games, or whether they are expecting more or less or something like that. It's going to be quite interesting. Again, it's another open world game, and this game is sort of open world, but it's very manageable, and I would say it's an open world without purpose. It's sort of like someone just said, why don't we throw car combat in here to give this game some variety in gameplay, and then they just basically built an open world environment where you have car combat between going missions. So but I guess we'll see how the open world fares in the new one. So like I said, I'll start that next week. But yeah, it was pretty cool to go back and play the original Rage. I would definitely recommend, if you still have this game and maybe only played it the first time around, and are interested in Rage 2, yeah, it was cool to go back in here and play. And what I'm really looking forward to is actually seeing, some of these characters return, and I'm wondering how the story is going to complement the sort of story in this one, because none of them are very heavily story-based games at all, but I wonder if there's going to be references that I'm going to get. All that is sort of really cool to go back and see, playing it the second time around, and now it's fresh in my mind. So, all right, have a good one, guys, and thank you all for watching.